From its very inception, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is concerned with labels. The title of the show itself plucks an offhand remark about that girl you used to date who was so weird, right? And then gives you a 4-season delve into her mind and her life. Labels are useful at describing things, but they can also be misleading, imperfect, especially those we ascribe to ourselves in the search of the clarity we think they'll bring us.
I'm a student.
TV show opening themes are themselves something of a label, telling you implicitly and explicitly what to expect, and when I see one done well, it's hard to look away. Throughout its near-flawless 4-season tenure, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend employs opening songs both in the conventional way and as just one addition to its intricate latticework of storytelling. Our protagonist, Rebecca Bunch, is one such person obsessed with labels, or to put it another way, narratives. From the first opening song, we know she's telling her story, as she recounts with a quirky, animated background how this all came to be. And by season 4, it's something else entirely. Star, co-creator, and co-composer Rachel Bloom even says, the reason the theme songs change is because the story Rebecca is telling herself each season changes. So if Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is about Rebecca learning to tell her own story, then the opening songs might be the titles of the chapters, segmented in a way that she can organize parts of her life, and more specifically, her search for a self. Season 1 sets the tone. This is a story. Okay, well, obviously this is a story, but this is a story about a story. Rebecca's making sure that we know what's what. Listen to the cadence. It's rushed, frantic, like someone coming up with an explanation on the spot for why they're 60 minutes late with barbecue to a D&D session. Why did she come to West Covina? Of course people ask her because, of course, it's a little out of the ordinary. A well-to-do lawyer dropping a 6-figure salary like hot rocks for a California town where she knows no one, with not even the beach as a viable excuse. And of course, we can tell from her tone and just the basic narrative that she's come here for Josh. But every episode opens with this blatant denial of that fact in the opening, and each episode title shares 2 things. Josh's name and an exclamation point, encapsulating at once the season's over-enthusiasm and the Josh tunnel vision. This is Rebecca's square one, a life framed by a lie she can't even bear to look at, so she decorates it with a bouncy little song and a cartoon backdrop. Pay no attention to the subtext behind the curtain. The song is the only one of the 4 to be animated. As Rebecca's first step, this is the period of her life most disconnected from reality, farthest away from the introspection we know she'll get to. But for now, things as they are a little too much for her to face. Interesting, too, that despite the denial, her friends-to-be, or at least the caricatures of them, seem to know better. Paula, Daryl, Greg, and Heather all back up Rebecca's rapid-fire "let me explain" with some
"she's the crazy ex-girlfriend."
What? No, I'm not.
Brutal honesty. In this opening, the title of the show is sung in this sort of high school bully Greek chorus way, and above each person is, well, a label. New bestie, new neighbor. She hasn't just pigeonholed herself, she's gone a step further and given everyone else their clear role, specifically one in relation to her. As of now, they are just buttresses in her story. But they aren't really there, of course, so this, like everything else, is in Rebecca's mind. And it's clear her subconscious knows more than she lets on. Her breathless delivery combined with the imaginary taunts reveals her sense of paranoia, that somehow people must know what she secretly does.
She's so broken inside.
And they must be chanting it behind her back. No matter how much she weaves her tales, something's nagging in the back of her mind. And we see the theme of Rebecca's life at this time crystal clear in these 60 seconds. Discord. She is unsettled and not in agreement with herself. She assigns the crazy ex-girlfriend label to herself, but she's already uncomfortable with the implications. The impulsive, unsavory parts of herself that she can't face yet are, well, crazy. Tied up in her meeting with Josh, this means that she must be the crazy ex-girlfriend. That's the only logical conclusion. The eponymous woman's so hung up on lost romantic love that she constructs a fantasy that's more bearable. Maybe the catchiest of the bunch? I don't know. Just my opinion. Off the tail end of season 1, her fantasy came true. She did what you do in a 2.5-star movie and got the guy. Took him rightfully back from that nightmarish one-dimensional bitch he was with who should have treated him better. She's giddy. A little too giddy. Pink, covered in hearts, backup dancer singing la-di-da, surrounded by all the trappings of love as she sees it. A flighty overcompensation for the terror underneath we see immediately from episode 1. And her one-woman show has now become a little ensemble. She's employed backup dancers now. Her brain puppets don't look like her friends, impossible now that these people are starting to know her better, So now they've been demoted to mere constructions of her imagination, and there's even a little joke at this one at one point. This also reminds me of another song in the same season, interestingly enough, also a song about Rebecca's simple perception of love, and a song that also involves Rebecca dumbing herself down for that perception. Rebecca's lingering self-awareness has traipsed into the lyrics themselves. Gone is the frenetic explanation of season 1. She's got her story down now. She's just a girl in love. And it's no wonder. Remember when, in season 1, Paula told her,
No, I'm crazy. You hear me? You're not
Oh my God, I'm
crazy.
crazy.
You're in love. And that is totally different.
And Paula's words are an external explanation, one that we'll learn isn't even about Rebecca, but about Paula's own life. Rebecca's not alone in her projections or idealization of life, but maybe, to some degree, that's true. Plenty of people do irrational things for love. But here, that's maybe not the whole story, and Rebecca knows it too. She's just supplanted one narrative for another, borrowing someone else's justification for her behavior. She can't be crazy, she must be in love. But for that to be the case, to warrant these actions that anyone would consider absurd, her love must be legitimate. So now she's got to prove it. She is in love. She is in love. Josh is the man of her dreams, right? Now, the episode titles reflect that snowballing anxiety. Each episode is still titled around Josh, but now it's followed by a question mark. Her relation to Josh as part of her story has had 2 settings so far. First, hyper-enthusiasm, and now, hyper-insecurity. So naturally, what follows is at its core a performance, an over-the-top imitation of what Rebecca believes love looks like. Or maybe more accurately, what she believes will convince her and those around her is love. But as the performance grows in scale, the nagging voices grow louder too. I can't be held responsible for my actions, and I have no underlying issues to address. She sings in the same saccharine tone. And of course, we know from future seasons that these words are not her own, but her mother's, a plea to a judge that her daughter was too incapacitated by uncontrolled, naive love, but love nonetheless, to be held accountable. Does Rebecca remember this, or is this memory surfacing of its own volition? Judging from events in the season, I'm to believe it's the latter. Regardless, it's her mother's words, her mother's denial of her agency taking over the framing of her life, in a show that will continually address the role that formative and parental figures have in establishing our worldview and values and core beliefs about ourselves, so it fits perfectly that the song Rebecca uses to convince herself would be directly borrowing her mother's words, and damn, Rachel Bloom, do you want to get a beer? And in true prolonged adolescence fashion, Rebecca's concluding statement is a la 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 la, I can't hear you, sticking her fingers in her ears. Finally, the bubblegum pop love fest is halted abruptly by an uncomfortable, hanging silence as Rebecca stares with this forced, plastered smile. First of all, I love this decision because it's just really funny, but it's also the last thing the song leaves you with. Discomfort. Rebecca's smile won't go away, she looks in pain, it's too quiet, and Josh's face is broken. In season 3, we've fully surpassed denial. She embraces the word crazy. It's the first word in the opening statement that is the theme song. Fine, I'm not in love, so I must be the other thing. But as she attempts to reclaim the word that was hurled at her with so much venom, she struggles to identify what exactly that means. Crazy must apply to her. Why else would she do these things, these terrible, incomprehensible things? Why else would the world make so little sense to her the way it does others, the way things refuse to come easy for her no matter how well she follows the script set out for her? So she's crazy. She uses the word crazy 7 times in this song, and as prevalent as the word itself are costumes. Performance is given key focus. In each of her 4 personas, Rebecca is imitating some variation on a recognizable pop culture genre. Is craziness scary? Is it sexy? Is it romantic? She cannot recognize or cannot trust her own perception of the world, so she leans on those that have been taught to her. She shifts from using first person in season 1 and season 2's song, where she gave the second person to her brain concoction backup dancers, and now Rebecca is talking to herself about herself. What the hell is going on? But while the 4 Rebeccas share the same stage, they in no way seem to want to be there together, and actually regard each other with this unconcealed disdain. And it tracks. Season 3 is full of change, disjointed, full of revelations and rock bottoms and back again. After all, life doesn't make narrative sense. As for the episode titles, now they're as disjointed as the opening. The season opens with a handful of Josh titles, but they now end in a period. See, this is why periods at the end of texts are so ominous. Then it's followed up by the fist pump Josh is irrelevant, swings back to Trent, and even gives Paula the mic for a bit. Finally, the season is capped off by titles following an accelerated Nathaniel track that ends the same way. Season 3 is also much slower in tempo, but that doesn't necessarily make it more certain. So many emotions, so many questions, and so many desperate attempts to answer them. It's almost like,
I don't know what story I'm in anymore, you know?
And the song even becomes half diegetic with the jokey, "What?" as she's watching herself perform on her phone. Once again breaking the fourth wall to tell us, yes, Rebecca is hearing these songs too, and her subconscious surfacing as she becomes aware of the role she plays. And as far as theatrics, Season 3 by far has the most elaborate sets. This is professional. And there's an interesting repetition of mirrors. Rebecca leaning against one with a reflection that doesn't match, the mirrors surrounding her on all sides, the carnival funhouse vibe, and maybe a stretch, but even the Carrie Underwood baseball bat to the car door. Now, this may be as simple as communicating ideas about reflections and cognitive dissonance and being able to look at yourself honestly, etc. But we also know Rebecca, pretentious theater kid she is not above a metaphor.
These shards are a metaphor for my soul.
So, coincidental or not, the glass motif paired with a grand performance after a rock bottom is something we saw all the way back in Season 1. But what's missing? An audience? Not one that we can see. We've had one in Cartoon Buddies and Puppeted Dancers, and now we have the idea of an audience.
When I sang my solo, I felt like a very palpable connection with the audience. It was like everyone was my mom.
So while she's becoming the most aware of her tendency to people please and project her own reality outward, she's still not sure what kind of performer she is, or even more importantly, who for. Season 3 isn't doubt creeping in, it's doubt barging in with the sudden, inopportune full force of an overbearing parent.
And you don't wanna be crazy. To clarify, yes, no, I'm not crazy.
And by the end of the season, Rebecca's made a decision. In a nice little parallel, another reckless act motivated by love has her facing a judge again, but this time, something's changed. Not only is she not crazy, she's responsible, making herself wholly an agent for the first time.
We hope this helps.
Each opening song is different. Each has some quality that the others don't, or a new play on the idea of performance, or something. Even so, Season 4 feels like the odd one out. Firstly, in its lyrics. For the first time, the lyrics omit the word crazy altogether, and also for the first time, they include Rebecca's own name. And secondly, Rebecca is no longer the one singing. A third-party, cheery sitcom voice introduces her using every adjective but crazy. She and Wanda really would be friends, huh? It feels like a questioning train of thought, getting at what this has always been about. Not crazy, not strictly love, but who is Rebecca? And at the first time that Rebecca's name is in the opening sequence, the titles of the season to follow will all begin with the word I. She has stopped performing and begun the process of being. Gone are the declarations in first person of Season 1 and 2, or the disjointed, accusatory yous of Season 3. The opening isn't an animation, or a fantasy, or acted out on a stage. It's a series of vignettes, clips from the show itself. So not inventions or costumes, but reflections on things that Rebecca has actually done.
Looking back on all those times, like that one time, and that other time.
Josh would like it. Other people are no longer props, they're actively included. Rebecca is actually considering her treatment of those around her. And that's huge for someone who had to sing the cognitive dissonance anthem, "I'm a Good Person," 3 seasons ago. Now, instead of telling others who she is, or telling them that she's a good person, she's allowing herself to honestly reflect, including on those traits she might see as negative, rather than denying them as she did in the past. You know, we're not really seeing a common theme. She's too hard to summarize. She concludes every time for 13 episodes. And maybe that's true. Maybe she is, and we are many things at once, in different quantities that always have the potential to change. Maybe qualities we found so heinous in ourselves were actually shared by other people in a different way. Maybe those traits we can't stand, someone else actually finds inspiring, and it helps them love parts of themselves too. Maybe when we're singing our songs, someone else is singing along. Wait. That's impossible. But as Rebecca grapples very frankly with the reality of who she is, spunky, sweet, generous friend, kinda mean, snarky, sarcastic, and what? We see she's getting closer to the answer she's been looking for since she set foot in West Covina. Who am I? Season 4 is an interrogation, but differently from Season 3, which was frantic and reactive, Season 4 seems to be genuinely curious. In Season 4, we also discovered that the songs we've been hearing since the beginning aren't just fourth wall breaks, but songs Rebecca actually writes herself in her mind to digest emotional situations. The opening songs, apparently not part of the episode proper, are in fact no exception to this. 11 O'Clock unambiguously acknowledges the opening songs as works of Rebecca's own fiction, too. During the show's most ambitious and elegant reprise,
Hey, what's a reprise?
the opening themes are a central part of this mashup. These are the back-of-the-book summaries for what she sees as significant periods in her life. She sings Season 1 with a fatigue of someone who's been there, done that, the bloated lie of that song like an ill-fitting t-shirt. In I'm Just a Girl in Love, she amends the lyrics from denial to honesty. I can't be held responsible to...
Didn't want to be held responsible for my actions.
Notably absent, of course, in the mashup is the Meet Rebecca of Season 4. Of course it is. She's not casting herself in the part. It's her most actualized season, and yet in the opening song, Rebecca has no voice. Even in her beginning and end little frames, she's miming. She's totally silent. But I don't think it's because she's voiceless per se.
Were you silent or were you silenced?
The season itself tells us otherwise. No one is speaking for her. Rather, this season she's in active pursuit to find her voice without inhibition. Especially for Rebecca, who for 3 seasons has been all too eager to answer falsely out of fear or have someone else choose a reality for her. But this Rebecca seems to be more okay with waiting, pausing. And it's okay if she doesn't immediately have an answer. Who's Rebecca? Give her a sec. She's figuring it out. In fact, it's not until the very last moments of the very last episode that she tells us.
It's like I just met myself. Like I just met Rebecca.
That line lands like an over-enthusiastic lapdog on my chest. And then she sits at a piano to play us a song. And this song, Rebecca's song, is unlike any of the ones we've heard. It's not She's the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. It's not She's Just a Girl in Love. It's not You Do, You Don't Want to Be Crazy. It's not Meet Rebecca. Rebecca's song lingers at the end of her fingertips, held between her thoughts and her hands, existing for a final moment only in her mind before she shares it with the world. Okay, I'm being dramatic. Who knows if this specific piece was some big revelational composition of Rebecca's life story. It probably isn't. Or maybe it is. She's dramatic too. Whatever the actual tune and chords and lyrics are, what follows is the first thing that Rebecca has created of her own inspiration, without censor or attempt to please or catering to anyone else. Season 4 begins with Meet Rebecca, and in the end, she did.
The whale is a symbol, Ahab. Though it's a chore, I'll just mop the floor.
Ahab, can't you see? The whale is a metaphor.